Welcome to the electrical section. As a preamble, the electrical section is the most important thing the lesson we do all the whole course. And the question is, we'll start off with the most important question: what is an electrical panel? Anybody?
Breaker box and circuit board.
Breaker box. Anything else? Anybody else?
Connection between the utility company and the house, where the two meet.
I think they meet outside.
Interface where everything in the house interfaces with the main feed.
You know how many junction boxes there are in a house? That's all a main panel is a junction box. But it serves a better purpose than that, and it serves the most important purpose there is in a house.
Is it power, turn it off or
Turn it off and turn it on.
power, cut power?
I don't need to turn it on and turn it off. We want it on all the time.
Distribution of power.
Distribution, excellent question, excellent answer, because that's exactly what it's not. I can have 20 of these all over the house. I don't need a box to distribute. I already got boxes all over the place, but that box is different than all the other boxes.
Monitors the amount of current going through the wire.
Monitors the amount of current. Well, that isn't monitoring what the meter does?
No.
It counts it. It doesn't monitor it. There's no readout for me to go
The
into.
meter can't snap off if it's overloaded.
I can't overstate this enough. The main panel with all those circuit breakers there is a fire prevention device. That's it. It's a fire prevention device. I can have wires going in, I can have electrical going in, and I can be powering a complete house without one breaker involved if I wanted to. People die from house fires. The most common house fire in the, as far as the insurance industry is concerned, is electrically caused fires. These fires are caused by the wrong size wire with the wrong size breaker. They have to be matched properly. Now, it's convenient that we do get to go in and turn on and turn off circuits, but the important thing is as we're running wires throughout the house, that they come to some location where the rating can be monitored and adjusted so that the breaker, that is a 15 amp breaker, would have a 14 gauge wire on it. Because if it was a 20 amp breaker and 18 amps was going through it, what would happen to that wire? Heat up. What happens when it heats up?
Fire.
Fire. Exactly. That's the purpose of a main panel, is to regulate the amount of current going on through wires throughout the whole house. To protect those wires, we have 14 gauge wires, we have 12 gauge wires, we have 10 gauge wires, which are the most three commonly used wires throughout the house. And this 14 gauge wire can handle 15, it's rated for 15. This 12 gauge is rated for 20, and this 10 gauge is rated for 30. Jason?
Yes.
What happens when I put 15 amps through this 10 gauge wire? That's the wrong wire for that breaker. What happens, Jason?
Nothing.
Very good, thank you. That was simple. What happens when that 30 amps is going through the 14 gauge wire?
It's gonna catch fire.
Well, it's going to heat up and it's going to cause a fire in something. Not certain, I haven't seen any statistics on it or read anything about it. I'm not certain if those wires do anything else other than ignite other things in the house. wires don't actually burn. The wire will get hot, and then I would imagine, I haven't seen this statistically, but everybody says it causes fires. It doesn't actually sit there and start flaming itself. Copper wires don't flame. Bullet, have you seen that?
No,
Or
I'm
you
agreeing
agree?
with your statement.
Right.
The heat it
heat.
generates and
Thank you.
ignites something else.
So, this whole concept here of the proper amount of current going through the proper sized wires would, is what the whole process is of making sure that there's no fires in a house. When we are inspecting this, do I care when I see, am I inspecting for a 12 gauge wire on a 15 amp breaker? Is there any reason I should be alarmed about it? I've found that I make that search fairly short in terms that I'm really looking for this. I'm looking for I'm looking for a 14 gauge wire on a 20 amp breaker. That's the most common misuse. Now, I'm sure that there's some place where you would find a 14 on a 30, but to make I've never seen it, but to make the search go a little quicker, I look at all my 20s and make sure there's no 14 on it. I don't care what's on I don't care what's on a 15 amp breaker. There's no wire in the house that's too small for the 15 amp breaker. All I care about is what's on the 20 amp breaker. Fire prevention device affects the whole complete house. Whole complete house, that's a little redundant. Here's the first half of the electrical circuit. We have a pole out here. And here's what we call a service lateral. This is the overhead wire on the service lateral. If it was an underground service, what do you think that wire is called? It's also called a service lateral. It's just an underground service lateral. Lateral is the term for the feed from the city to the house. Right in this location where your drip loop is, on a residential house, this is 12240, there's 3 wires that is bonded with the city. This is where that connection, who said that it was a connection? The panel was the connection. This is where the connection is. There are 2 hots and a neutral. 3 wires that then attach to the house wiring and has a drip loop that then goes in some kind of casing, and then this wire goes down to the meter. This is called the wire from the drip loop down to the meter is called the service drop. Now, I have heard electricians and I've heard tradesmen all refer to the whole thing as the service drop. But to be more accurate, this is the lateral and this is the drop. The attachment, where it comes in, down to the top of the meter. Then, from the meter, it enters the house and goes to the panel. And this wire is called the service entrance. And that goes to the panel. Commonly, we have service sizes that can be any one of those four. 80 amp, 100 amp, 150 amp, 200 amp. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to how we define the service size of the house?
Meter has a number on the outside.
Meter has a number on it on the outside. And this meter would say 200 amps, correct? I have seen two in 3,000 and counting inspections of 100 amp panels, or 100 amp meters. So 200 amps. And those were only inside of meters inside old buildings in Schenectady.
Now, we looking on the service entrance part, it's good exact measurement. We look at how far, once it enters the house, how far it can be to the panel.
No,
Okay, it's like 5 feet or
distance
something.
isn't an issue. The only thing that's distance is the distance to the ground. That's another issue. But as far as how long my service entrance gets to be, is he accurate that that 200 meter defines the size, the service size of this house? You're shaking your head.
No,
Good, good. What defines the service size of this house?
isn't it the 200 is what it's capable of, but then the wire
breaker.
coming in is
The
what,
main breaker, and what are you saying?
well, the main service coming in, what the size of the wire is capable
The size of the wire, the main service coming in. This, when you say main service coming in, which one of these? I've already
The
named them all.
service lateral.
So the service lateral. I don't know what the limits of the service lateral is, but they're not anything we have to be concerned with. I'm sure they can handle 500, 600 amps. It's, Joe, did you ever,
No, I don't,
I look at it
it's
as,
how it ties in from at the mast coming down, so
I know, I
service
look
drop
at
to
it as
service
I have a
entrance.
potential of 1,000,000 amps out there on that
Yeah.
pole. I don't care. This is the, this is, just kind of, this is the city's problem. My problems start at the
Exactly.
connection.
Exactly.
Okay?
Service entrance.
So, this is an unknown quantity that doesn't matter and doesn't concern us. That's certainly not going to define, because that goes to every house. This house has particular service size. What determines the service size of this house?
Service entrance.
The service entrance.
The smallest of the three.
Which one? The service entrance or the smallest of
The
the
service drop, the meter, and then the main breaker.
three? Wrong.
The service entrance. We have to measure that.
The meter has nothing to do with it. That's the only part you're wrong. The three things that you have to look at is the service drop, the size and rating of that wire, the service entrance, and then the main breaker. Let me ask you a question, since you said the meter. Is the meter a limiting factor? At 200, does it stop and it won't let anything else more in?
Oh, okay. So it's just wouldn't be accurate? If you-
Pardon?
If you went over the size of the meter, it wouldn't be accurate? So you
That's
said-
exactly right. It's
Okay.
calibrated up to 200. Okay, anything more than 200, it's willy-nilly. But it's calibrated to 200. It's a counting device. That's all it does. How many hours on, you know the drill. But if it goes, and they calibrate it up to 200, I don't know what it does. At 250, it may overcharge, and you know how the service electrical company doesn't want to overcharge you, so, wow, we can't have 240 amps going into this house, you may not pay enough. So, service drop, service entrance, main breaker. Those are the three elements that go into determining the service size of a house. There are three sizes of wire. Here's some gauges that will allow you to put these gauges. You put these gauges and you can compare the, and you just compare the service size to that. The smallest one on the end is the 100. The middle one is 150, and then the large is 200. So the thicker the wire, the higher the rating of that wire.
Couldn't the 100 be to the 60 also?
The 80. The 80, you mean the 80 for fuse systems?
Yeah, but sometimes I see 60.
Aren't they 80?
Yeah, no, I don't know, you mean 60, not 80.
Do I mean 60?
Yes.
I'm getting old, I forget that. I haven't done it. It's
You're busy.
60. I'm busy? Is that it? Oh, he gives me an excuse. God, he's such a bore.
Also, I just wanted to interject one thing. I stand corrected. I looked up. It says how wires catch on fire. It's actually the heat generated in the wire actually catches the insulation on fire.
Insulation of the house?
No, insulation of the sheathing. So
The sheathing.
it's the
called
wire's insulation that catches fire. The two materials most commonly used are PVC or a cross-linked polyethylene. The PVC is good up to 70 degrees C, and it's self-extinguishing, meaning that if you don't have a constant heat source, okay. The external for the cross-linked polyethylene is up to 90. So what ends up happening is the wire heats up, starts the plastic on fire, which then in a result catches the material around it.
Like I said, the wire catches the material around it.
Yeah, but I give you the wrong
Just a gas
information.
jet.
Yes, you are correct.
Yes. The wire gets hot. There may be a little flame coming off of
From the
wire
covering.
covering,
Yeah.
but that just ignites everything else.
Exactly.
So, thank you.
I remember right, Romex had a paper wrapping inside of it too, keeping the wires separated.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Is that what that?
It's on the ground.
There's some great
Yeah, but the
videos.
paper
Keep going.
would ignite.
Go on YouTube. There's some really cool videos. People.
Wouldn't the paper ignite?
Sure.
Yeah.
It should.
Or maybe it's some kind of treated paper that doesn't ignite, and that's how it protected the vinyl sheathing.
I think it just separated it.
I think it's just a separator.
Separate the ground, usually around the ground.
Well, you know, now they're using a fabric that the wire comes through. It gets put into its plastic insulation. Then it's wrapped in a fabric, and then all of them are put into a bundle, and then wrapped in fabric again, and then they're coated again.
Whew. And that's what's the problem with knob and tube, that old crackly cloth. It's a freaking going to go up. Okay, so we have 100, 150, 200 amp services, which is going to be defined by the smallest size. So if I have a service drop, entrance, and breaker, that is 200, 100, and a 150 breaker. What's the service size?
100.
100 amp. What defined it?
Smallest wire.
Smallest wires. This house in danger.
Yes,
Because isn't it fun the way they designed this box? Oh, they're so smart. They had it all figured out. They know what's going on. Here's your main panel. Here's your main breaker. I have a 150 amp main breaker. I have a 50 amp rated wire. I have all these 15 and 20 amp breakers. You think I should have these pre-drawn before I come in, but what would be the fun in that?
The heater.
What? What? Huh? Was that mean? Were you saying something mean?
Again, artistic.
You know, if you get mean at me, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get upset and go home and drink. Oh wait, I was gonna do that anyway.
Just gonna rush the process.
Okay, I have a 30 amp breaker, 20 amp breaker, 30 amp breaker, 20, 20, 15, 15. $150 amp breaker here, 158, 150. So the size of this, if my drop was 200, my entrance was 100, and the breaker was 150. My size was what again? 100 amp service. Why? What's happening here? Why? It's a fire. What's going to go on? Somebody explain it to me.
Draw more current than what the wires rated.
Draw more current. Oh my God, I can't really believe that. Okay, good point. Let's go back to the other one. Let's take a dark house. We have a dark house, okay? Not one power on. It's like Halloween and they ran away or they're in under the covers. They don't want anybody to knock on the door. Okay, I have 1,000,000 amps up here. I have a 1 amp light bulb down in the basement. I have a 200 amp meter. I have a 150 amp breaker, or a main box breaker. I have a service drop of 100 amps, and I have a service drop of 100. I have a service entrance of 100. No, yeah, whatever. Something. How many amps, if I took a measuring on this service entrance wire right here, how many amps would that meter feel?
Half an amp.
Yeah, what he said. I was not following all your amps.
You couldn't follow that?
No.
I thought it was so clear.
No.
No, it wasn't. I have a 1 amp bulb right here.
Okay.
Nothing else is on in the house. I have 1,000,000 amps up here.
Yeah.
I have 150 here, and I have a service drop of 100 amps, and I have a 200 amp meter. If I put a meter on that, nobody else, how many amps will I feel on that cable right there, the service entrance?
100 amps.
100 amps, because it's a 100 amp meter. Correct?
Okay.
Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree?
No.
Why?
It's only gonna draw what your little light wants it to pull.
Electricity isn't being forced into the house. These aren't limiting things like dams to stop the electricity from coming in. If you have 1 amp on, you're going to have a 1 amp current going through. This gets complicated. Gotta stay on the right page. I got this bedroom circuit down here that has a light bulb right here drawing 1 amp, 1.0 through that 15 amp breaker, through that 150 amp breaker on this 100 amp service entrance, and 1,000,000 out on the street. If that's drawing 1 amp, there's going to be 1 amp drawn through the whole system because it's drawn in, it's not being forced in and then limited by anything. And if I put a meter on that line right there, it's going to read
0.
right. If I light this one up with 2 amps, what am I going to feel there?
2 amps.
Right. If I take, and I've done this at my brick and mortar school, I had these coffee pots, it's Mr. Coffee, The electric ones, when we had a CEU and I had 4 coffee pots on the table, it was on a 15-amp breaker, and it operated 3 fine. I plugged the 4th one in and it popped. That tells me the 15-amp breaker was working. It also tells me those things draw 4 amps. So, I get 4 coffee pots on this circuit, and that breaker's supposed to break, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, what happens?
Eat the wire.
And the wire does,
Catches on fire.
well, Joe thinks it catches on
Insulation
fire.
catches on fire.
Well, I think the house catches on fire, but who am I? Okay. 16 amps. So, in effect, okay, let's do this. I happen to have a New Year's Eve party, and every circuit in every house is being used. 30, 50, 70, 85, 100, 115, 130, 145, 165, 185, 215. I'm drawing 215 amps total. All of these wires are good. They're all percolating along, and damn, oh, my main breaker pops because I'm drawing 250. So, what's the purpose of that breaker?
So you don't.
To keep my bill low?
No, so you don't overload it.
Overload what? Every circuit here is fine.
You're gonna. You'll-
I'm not worried about the lateral, that's the city's
The
problem.
drop.
The drop in the entrance. That's protecting this, which is only rated for 150. Every breaker has a designated job of protecting a wire. And when there's a double tap, he says, I only am supposed to protect 1 wire. I can't do 2, I quit. Is that what goes on? He goes on strike. You get a letter from his attorney saying he needs more money. We'll get to double taps in a minute. The purpose of the breakers are to protect all the wires from overheating. It's a fire prevention device. It depends on how many coffee pots you have plugged in. I'm lost. Is that, nope, I wasn't. Oh, there's the mess. It depends on how many coffee pots you have plugged in as to which wire you're actually protecting, if not all of them. 1 amp is pulled and goes through, and then everything, 1 amp goes through, everything's working fine. Service size is defined by the smallest of these groups. Now, let's talk about breaker size. If I have, what is it on this thing? Okay, I have a 100 amp service, a 150 amp service, and a 200 amp service. Now, if I have a drop, an entrance, and a breaker, let's do some of this. I'm a little lost. I have a 100 amp drop, 150 amp entrance, and 150 amp main panel breaker. Service size, we've already determined is 100, correct? Because this service drop is rated for 100. So what's the defect?
Breaker size wrong.
Breaker size wrong. How are you making that judgment?
Breaker size should be the size of your smallest wire.
Because the house is defined by the smallest wire. So therefore, you can't call this, thank you, that was exactly accurate. You can't call the defect because if the service size is defined by the smallest, then the service size smallest isn't the problem. Breakers, the breaker's the problem. This breaker needs to be 100 amp. Remember, whatever your service size is determined to be out of these three, that then determines what the fault is. Which is always meaning that we're going to wind up changing the breaker size to match the smallest size. So don't write your defect up, and I've seen it done that way, wire's too small. No, the wire was just fine because it's defined that the service size is the smallest. So how can the definition is, the standard is what the wire is, they would turn around and say that wire's wrong. No, the breaker size is wrong. On top of that, it's just less expensive to change the breaker than to run the new wire. Okay? So, sometimes this gets convoluted. You see all sorts of machinations in terms of size, breaker size 100, but always, if you just always make it simple and go with whatever size the breaker is, make sure that nothing above it is, nothing is lower than your breaker size. If you have a 200 amp breaker and anything lower in the system, that's a problem. It's just that the lowest thing determines what size the breaker is. So write your defects up in that manner. Don't say that the lowest thing needs to be changed to higher. Say that the higher breaker needs to be matched the lowest wire in the system. Yeah.
What if there's conduit running down the house and you can't see the wire size going into the meter?
Well, it depends on who you're talking to. Jamie assumes it's going to be lower and calls that out as a defect. It's also invisible. I don't think you can call that out as a defect. If all I see is the main breaker because it's all in conduit, then that's my service size. But Jamie has had experience, I think in his house, he actually took, he found out that the service,
Breaker's too high.
it will, yes, it will pop at 100, the wire will burn up. Now remember, if it's only, as long as it takes your popcorn popper to pop, 3 minutes probably isn't going to be enough to heat the wire and burn the house down. So a lot of people live with these kind of defects in their house all the time because 3 minutes of overcharging 100 amps on a 60 amp breaker, if it ever hits that, it really, it's going to, you're not going to draw, what do they use to kill people in an electric chair? They use 4 amps. It's under 5. So you're not going to find all the time the main breakers being forced to pop. What's going to happen is it's all these breakers that are going to be forced to pop. Because here's 15 amps. Well, it only takes 4 coffee pots to pop that. Now, that breaker may not pop right away. It also takes a while for that wire to heat up and for the insulation to catch on fire. So a lot of people live with these problems all the time because it's only 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of overheating. That's where you'll see the singe marks when you open up a panel, that it was too hot for a short period of time. Not hot enough for anything to catch on fire, but hot enough to leave its singe marks behind. But when you have Christmas or Thanksgiving and you have a house full of relatives and all the coffee pots are going, all the TVs are on from the kids, every circuit's being used to its max and it's on for an extended period of time, that's when houses burn down. Only around Thanksgiving. There's a reason not to have a Thanksgiving Day party. Yeah, go out and barbecue your turkey out back. Please don't use the oven. Any questions so far? Just remember, when you see a 60 amp, you used to have a fuse system. So if you do see a box that looks like it had a fuse, or you walk into a fuse, just be cognizant of the fact that that wire may not be a 150 amp breaker, or a 100 amp or 150 amp. And for the record, the difference between a 60 amp and a 100 amp is almost impossible to tell the difference. This is a general gauge that will generally tell you the size of the wire. It won't be exact because different manufacturers have used different sheathing, thank you, around it. So some of them are closer to snug and some of them are a little loose. So you're going to have to get used to using this. By the time you get used to using this, you'll be able to recognize it on your own. I haven't pulled mine out in 10 years. So this is a temporary tool that will help you right now feel more comfortable about what the wire size is. Within 6 months or a year, you'll not need this. You'll look at it and know which it is.
So is a fuse box always a defect if it's perfectly correctly wired and it's in good shape?
I'd rather have, I'll answer it two ways. Fuses are not unsafe. It's just that it's operator error. The insurance industry quit insuring homes because too many people on that Christmas and Thanksgiving evening were putting quarters in because they didn't have any more fuses.
My grandfather used to do that.
Yeah. And if I go up to a fuse box, and I see stacks of spare fuses, which you see all the freaking time, what's this tell you?
Happens a lot.
Pardon?
Happens a lot.
It's tripping.
It's popping all the time. Or he wouldn't have stacks of fuses there because on Christmas Eve, he's not headed down to Walmart to get some extra fuses. He doesn't want to make the trip. So he figures, well, I'm just popping one a day. If I get a 2-month supply, I'll have 60 around. I don't have to go to Walmart for a while. That's the indication that we have the wrong size box here. We have too many circuits and there's too much going on. The industry does not suggest that fuses are unsafe. They're just unsafe in the hands of the home buying public. They are safer. If I was going to build a house today, I would ask my builder to make it a fuse system, because that electrical fuse will never fail compared to mechanical breakers. Mechanical,
Cheat, right?
huh?
You can try and cheat though. If you're supposed to have a 15 amp fuse in there, you can still put a 30 amp in there.
That's right.
Thinking
And that's,
that you're gonna get away from.
yes, but what they don't understand is you're burning the house down. So the operator error is the reason insurance companies won't insure a safer system, is because too often there's too many cheats to get around the effects of the breaker. So when somebody says, oh my God, my house is going to burn down with the fuse system, no, that's not true. The house is going to burn down because you got stupid. Okay? So, yes, you see a fuse system, you call it out as a defect. The defect is insurance companies are no longer insuring fused homes because the insurance company do not want to insure stupid people.
Never have.
Okay. Stupid enough to pay the bill, just don't be stupid enough to burn your house down.
So if your client asks you, like, what do we do in that situation where you point out that they have a fuse box,
Yes,
what would you tell them?
I tell them exactly what I just told you. Unfortunately, these days, insurance companies, most insurance companies, Joe, do you have any feedback on that?
Specifically on,
Most insurance companies, I can't say all, but most insurance companies are no longer insuring fuse systems. So therefore,
Correct.
if you don't call it out, they're going to try and get insurance and they're going to be fighting all day long with the insurance company who's not going to want to insure them. So you might as well call it out as a problem or an issue. I make it a major
I was
concern.
just gonna ask that.
I make it a major concern, and again, why do I make some things major concerns?
Is it could?
Well, but not only that, but I wanted to reach the attorney. Here's the guy that's going to do all the arguing for the client. You can't always count on the realtor doing the arguing. Your attorney, I make things majors that aren't really majors. I just want to make sure that the attorney addresses So I'll make it a major. The realtor looks at me, but it's only $800. And it is. It's only about $800 to do a simple 100 amp panel. And to replace that, just run the circuits over here, bang, it's $800. Why, Dan, are you calling it a major? It's because I want to make sure the insurance company, and everybody knows, I said this is an issue, because when they go to get this house insured, it's not going to get insured. It's going to cause problems down the road. So let's address it now. The only way, the only power I have, once I walk away from that house, to make sure that the attorney, the realtor, and the client are all discussing something, is me making it a major. Too many times I take important issues and made them comments. And then my client was so invested in buying this house, he only wanted one thing to worry about, and it wasn't going to be my fuse system. So he gets down the road and bang, nothing happens, and then he finds out he can't get insured at the last moment because the insurance company didn't get back to him, and now it holds the whole process up 2 months while they got to get an electrician in to change the fuses out when they find out that doesn't happen. Stop it in the bud up front.
Because the lawyers typically know, if you point out that it's fuses and or knob and tube, and it's live and working, just because it's there, you have to make sure that it's, you know, live and working. Then you want to make sure to your client that, to ensure them that their insurance company is going to cover them.
And so the way I make sure that all that happens, because I don't trust my client, or I don't trust the realtor enough to get to their attorney and stop their process to take care of this. Everybody in the deal wants to make sure it happens because they got to move out by the end of the month because they don't want to pay a double mortgage. They got to get their kids in school. Everybody's got all these pressures on them. Nothing's going on, and the fact that it's a fuse system, well, that's no big deal. People have fuses, and I've heard they're really safe. All true. It's just uninsurable. So I'm using that as an example of why I call things out majors that may not be majors, but I don't care. As long as it makes it to the table that all three of those people, the realtor, the client, and the attorney are all talking about it, I've done my job. Let them hash out what they're going to do. But if it doesn't make the table, it's my fault. That's what I do with attics. If I don't see an attic, there's a major. If there's an attic there and I can't inspect it, I call that a major. But Dan, there may be nothing wrong there. I know. So that's where I differ than probably, I know Joe wouldn't do that, do you?
If you can't get into an attic,
Do you call that a major?
I call it a major. Only, not that there's a major defect, it's that to bring up to the lawyers and to everybody else that, hey, I need to get in there in the next 2 days.
Sounds
Have
like-
someone cut it out. When I pick up the radon, I'll come and peek my head up in there because there are, or there could be major defects, and I want to make sure I can look at it. Now, if my client says, hey, it's no big deal, then I will identify that in my report that my client waived the
attic
that
inspection.
that attic inspection.
And that's exactly right. You sound
So-
like you went to my school.
Yeah, I've been here for a little while.
Yeah. So it's a major, even though we don't know that it's a major. Now, normally I tell you guys you can't call anything out unless you see the defect. Attics and things that I think need to get to the attorney's attention will get a major, just so that the conversation can go on. Okay, so you get the drift. The breakers are to protect these wires. You add the sizes of those, 12, 14, and 10. This is to protect the back wires. This is to protect all the room wires.
Now, should the total of the individual breakers numbers never exceed,
No,
I mean, mathematically, or no?
no.
Okay.
Now, I've had discussions with an electrician that used to teach on my continuing education. He even said that there's a formula. There's a formula for how many breakers, the number that these circuits are, that will tell you how much is going through the panel. Because you can have all these numbers add up, which go up over the 100, but the electrician has a formula that they use mathematics. Somehow it somehow the number and the formula that they use will declare whether this main wire is safe or not, even when there is no main breaker. But no, to answer your question, that number always, typically is higher than whatever this number is. Because very seldom is every circuit going to be working at its full capacity. You got 4-bedroom circuits that have a 15-amp breaker, unless they're having a coffee pots in each room, they're not gonna break.
It's a defect if there's no main break.
That we're gonna talk about in the next lesson. We'll get there. Because that's another gray area. But Dan Osborne has his own very certain opinion on it. Any questions? Service drop, service entrance, function of the panel? Anything?
What about going into like a sub panel off the main breaker?
Next lesson. Okay? Now, one of the reasons why I think this is so important is the electrical system affects every area of the house, whether you're in the garage, whether you're in the attic, whether you're in the basement, everywhere else. So, and on top of being the biggest safety issue there is, that's why we spend so much time on it. We've spent 2 full nights on this. Okay?